Everybody's been saying, where has Beast Mode been?
In that YB house.
Work hard and play harder.
And that's just the goal with the Sharp Football Analysis podcast, is to discover and uncover new ways to analyze football, and then share that information and disseminate that material in an easy to understand manner. And then at that point, all you got to do is let the Marshawn Lynch principle take over. Yeah, that is, when we do it so constantly, so frequently, and so repetitively, and so accurately, even those who hate analytics, even the cynics and the skeptics, it just will click in their mind that they're so worn down and frustrated they will have to sit down and listen to reason. And that is the Marshawn Lynch principle. Because like he says,
if you just run through somebody's face, a lot of people ain't gonna be able to take that over and 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 over again. They're just not gonna want that.
Think there's a deeper metaphor there?
Run through a face, then you don't have to worry about them no more.
I feel like beast mode every day, man.
Welcome into the Week 15 Sharp Football Analysis Podcast. My name is Warren Sharp of SharpFootballAnalysis.com and SharpFootballStats.com. I am joined by Evan Silva of RotoWorld.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Evan Silva. He writes the awesome matchup articles that come out every Thursday. We're happy to be back with you guys this week recording another podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at SharpFootball. Evan, great weekend ahead, Week 15. First of all, we got Saturday games. Second of all, we got some really key pivotal matchups that are going to decide playoff seeding, who makes the playoffs. It's a fun time of year. How are you doing? Are you looking forward to the slate? And how excited are you for seeing some football on Saturday as well?
Yeah, it's always fun to have the weekend spaced out a little bit. So we're going to have a Thursday game, 2 Saturday games, and then a Monday night game. And that kind of decreases the workload on Sunday, which just gets ridiculous when, there's 14 or 15 games on a Sunday. But I like the Saturday games. I'm going to be covering the later one, which I believe is the Kansas City-Los Angeles game, the Chiefs-Chargers game for clarity on RotoWorld, and I'm excited to watch that game.
Yeah, absolutely. That game is going to be obviously, I think, probably could eliminate one of those teams. It has the potential to at least. So a lot of good football. Let's dive right into this. As we normally do, guys, we are going to touch on 2 players that we think are slightly underrated that might have some value, touch on a couple players that are overrated that you might want to try to avoid, especially in tournaments. And then we're going to break down a couple of the games and talk about some of the matchups in detail. So pretty good show on tap because we got a great card. So the great cards are fun to discuss. Evan, let's go ahead and start with a player that you feel might be a little bit underrated, and hit your boy up in Philadelphia first, and then segue into the other game that we've got where we both have a player that we think could be interesting.
Yeah, so the first guy that I think is a little underrated this week, and I think that people still consider the Eagles' backfield to be a 3-way committee, but I think that we may see some change in that, or potentially big change in that this week. We've started to see it change over the last 2 weeks because the upward trajectory for Jay Ajayi's usage has gone on for a multi-week period, and last week we saw Jay Ajayi with 16 touches, his most in an Eagles uniform, 47% of the snaps, his most in an Eagles uniform, and 22 routes run, his most in an Eagles uniform. And this is a very good matchup against the Giants. The Giants have given up 4.73 yards per carry to opposing running backs in their last 5 games, 4 rushing touchdowns to opposing running backs during that 5-game stretch. Coming off that 16-touch effort in a game that I think that the Eagles should play with a lead despite having Nick Foles at quarterback, this Giants offense I just think matches up really poorly with a very good Eagles defense. I think they're going to be able to give the ball to Jay Ajayi 20 times in this game, and he's been hyper efficient since he got out of that Dolphins offense where he was really he's a kind of a one-dimensional back. I mean, he can add some in the receiving game, but he's really a grinder and a big play runner. His strength is as a runner, and it's turned out that he's fit this Eagles offense, which is strong in the offensive line, much better than he did in Miami, which is fairly weak in the offensive line, and is better suited for a back like Kenyon Drake, who is a true all-purpose back. But I think that Jay Ajayi has a chance at a breakthrough game in an Eagles uniform this week.
Yeah, and I won't disagree with you at all there. The guy that I'm going to be steering towards is, and again, you're going to propose a good argument for his counterpart in the backfield, and they both are just in good situations in my view due to the price tag and due to some of the underpriced guys. I think you're going to talk about one in a second who a lot of people are probably going to be slamming these lower-priced guys in and ignoring a guy like Latavius Murray. And I haven't heard too many people talk about him. Granted, you're more plugged in than I am, Evan, but I think he's an intriguing player this week, and I think there's some big upside for him due to some injuries for the Cincinnati Bengals. You talk about it doesn't matter what year it is. Whenever Vontaze Burfict, he seems to have annual suspensions or injuries, and whenever he's out, like this run defense for the Bengals completely suffers. And Jerick McKinnon, he's running behind an offensive line that is a little bit beat up. If you look at some of the injuries that Minnesota had, especially last week against the Carolina Panthers, they once those guys went out, I mean, their offense definitely languished a bit. But if you look at the production from these running backs last week, they both had almost equal carries. Latavius had 9, McKinnon had 7. But Latavius only had a 22% success rate, only 1.6 yards per carry behind that line, whereas McKinnon averaged a 71% success rate and 6.6 yards per carry. Now, small sample size, Latavius Murray's probably going to get more touches here, but I will caveat that a little bit that Minnesota, if they have a big lead, which they're 11 and a half point, I think they're 11-point home favorites here. If they have a big lead and they're doing well, I mean, they're probably going to rest the running back Latavius Murray, who's like your workhorse, starts the game off for you, and you might let McKinnon in there a little bit more in the third and fourth quarters. So that's a possibility. But I just think you look at this Bengals defense, and one of the things that I've got going on at Sharp Football Stats is the trending performance, which I'm big into this time of year, and so I've built a number of different visualizations for trending performance. And one of my absolute favorite right now is if you go under the defensive tab at Sharp Football Stats and you go down to efficiency success and scroll over to the trending performance for defenses, you'll see that the Cincinnati Bengals, season long, they rank 30th in run defense. And season long, they rank 24th in explosive run defense. But the last 3 weeks, they are allowing 18% of rushes to gain 10 or more yards. It's an astronomical number. It's dead last in the league. And McKinnon, just with the upside and explosiveness that he possesses, I think could have some upside there. Then you also factor in they don't have Rudolph at tight end. So, of course, Thielen's going to get some more passing attempts. But you look at McKinnon coming out of the backfield. I just think that there's a lot of good upside. But tell me a couple good things. You like Murray as well.
Yeah, I do like Murray. He has, he is the guy that they want to give the ball to when they are in control of the game. Now, the matchup is very good for Jerick McKinnon. I actually think that they could both have good games in the same game. So it's really not necessarily an either or. I mean, there are things to like about McKinnon. The Bengals have given up the 8th most receiving yards to opposing RBs. That plays into Jerick McKinnon's skill set. And they both should benefit from a decimated Bengals defense, particularly in the defensive front. So everyone knows by now that Vontaze Burfict is a difference maker. He's out with a concussion, but the Bengals are also going to be without their middle linebacker, Kevin Minter, due to a hamstring injury. They're also going to be without their strong side linebacker, Nick Vigil, due to an ankle injury, and starting defensive end Michael Johnson due to a pectoral injury. So we're talking about a front seven missing 4 of its 7 critical players. There has been talk this week of the Bengals that maybe they've just given up. I'm not so sure about that. They absolutely looked like they'd given up last week against the Bears. I mean, getting blown out by the Bears at home 33-7. Either way, whether or not they've given up, I think that they are going to really struggle on the road against this Vikings defense that plays so well at home. And I think the Vikings are in a prime bounce-back spot after that loss, that tough loss to Carolina last week. I think that they are primed for a bounce-back. So I think the Vikings can, control time of possession in this game, and really McKinnon and Latavius can get theirs. You have a little bit more touchdown upside with Latavius. You have a little bit more PPR upside with Jerick McKinnon. It would be very contrarian, but I think also potentially profitable to play both Latavius Murray and Jerick McKinnon in the same lineup. They're both priced very reasonably, particularly on DraftKings, and I think that you could get a lot of points out of them together.
Interesting strategy there. That will be fascinating. Yeah, if you look at the game flow of this game and you say, okay, well, Minnesota should be up. They should be able to run the ball. The easiest way to move it on this defense of the Bengals will be to run it, especially when you have the lead. But then conversely, Cincinnati's going to have to pass because they're down. And you look at the pass defenses that the Bengals have faced. The Steelers, ever since they lost Shazier, they're not nearly as good as their 10th year-to-date rating suggests. They've definitely fallen off over the last several weeks in terms of their pass defense. And then you look at the Bears, pretty good. But before that, the Bears ranked 14th. Before that, they played the Browns, who ranked 28th in pass defense. And so they just haven't played like the Vikings are legit, like inside the top 10 pass defense. And it's going to make the job even more difficult for Dalton and this team to convert first downs, to move the chains, which could mean even more possessions, an advantageous field position for the Vikings. So I like that. Let's go ahead and hit a player that you feel could be overrated, possibly for tournaments where you want to try to avoid either a higher price tag or, in this guy's case, high usage rates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is risky to go against a guy who has been so good in his role and is seeing a ton of work, and that's Kenyon Drake. But I think that, just from paying attention to who everybody's talking about and who everybody thinks is like a must-play, everybody seems to think that Kenyon Drake is a must-play. And, I get it. He's been terrific. His price isn't reflective of his role in the Dolphins' offense. And my take on it is kind of narrative-driven. I played a bunch of Kenyon Drake the last 2 weeks and certainly profited from it. But I think I'm going to go away from him in tournaments this week because I think his ownership is going to be high. And I think the Dolphins are not going to play well in this game at Buffalo, coming off that super emotional Monday night upset of the Patriots in a game where no one was really giving the Dolphins a chance. They played by far their best game of the year. Now they're on a short week, going to Buffalo, always a tough place to play. I think that the running back play in this game is LaShawn McCoy. And I think that Kenyon Drake, again, for all the reasons that I mentioned before, I think he's a guy to strongly consider fading in tournaments. Yeah, and that would be, again, the definite contrarian take, which oftentimes is what's going to lead you to those tournament wins or placing highly if your guy does well, or if the rest of the board that everybody's on really does struggle.
which is kind of what you need to do. Mine is not so much. I don't want to say this entire team is going to struggle, even though I've chosen teams in the past in this spot to say I think that they're overrated. But this literally is a collection of players on this team, and draw your own conclusions. I'm not on the 49ers here, but I think that the Titans are going to struggle against this 49ers defense, which sounds absurd. It sounds absolutely ludicrous. What were we just talking about? 7 weeks ago, back in week 7, where we were talking about the Dallas Cowboys going out there in an absolute smash spot for Ezekiel Elliott. We loved his upside running the football. We loved the receiving capability. He posted 3 total touchdowns, over 150, 175 combined yards, something like that. It was a gorgeous and glorious day, and people were loading up on players against the 49ers. And the 49ers haven't gotten necessarily any healthier, they haven't had any key defensive players return. But you look at some of their recent trending performance, over the last 3 weeks, this team has gone from number 20th in rushing success rate allowed to number 1 in the NFL. They are allowing just a 36% success rate on runs against them the last 3 weeks. They have gone from the NFL's worst defense in allowing explosive runs to the NFL's 4th best defense in allowing explosive runs. So this team really has come along, and the obvious answer, and this is why I love the strategy of this, it relates to the quarterback. It relates to the offensive performance. When the defense feels like they're playing for something, and suddenly they really do feel like they're playing for something here. Garoppolo is undefeated. It's their first home game. They feel like they've got something going on here. It doesn't appear like Kyle Shanahan is holding back as much as he was when he had those other quarterbacks in there. So they're accessing more of the upside from their playbook as well. Certainly not the entirety of it, but more than what they were. And you look at the overall performance of the defense, and it's definitely gotten better. You look at the Titans' offense, and they're struggling. I mean, Marcus Mariota, whether it's his hamstring, his knee, has not looked great this year from the very beginning of the year. But, if you were looking at this game, Evan, back at the start of the season, guaranteed, and I'll do that. I'll look up in my 2017 football preview. I'm going to look up what the line was on this game when because Tennessee was a team that was expected to do really well, going out to San Francisco later in the season. And as I'm flipping the pages here, I will tell you that Tennessee was actually projected to be favored by 3 points in this game at the start of the season. And right now they're catching a point and a half as an underdog. Just tells you how the 49ers, even though they're having a worse year than expected, are doing much better in terms of their trending performance. I just think that several of these players are probably going to struggle. I mean, to start the season, everybody wanted in on Corey Davis, a lot of the wide receivers, Marcus Mariota, and now the passing offense really has not done a whole lot. I'm not going to say that they aren't going to get anything done out in San Francisco. I'm just suggesting that this is not like a slam dunk spot like you used to have when people would go out to San Francisco and you would want to play them all. Garoppolo's going to possess the ball. They're going to convert third downs. They're going to move the ball, and that's going to take away time of possession. And so it's not a slam dunk, but I kind of like the fact that I am not going to be rostering any Titans in DFS this weekend. With that said, Evan, let's go ahead and move on to breaking down a couple of these games, a couple of the biggest, most important ones. And let's start with an early game on Sunday where we've got the Green Bay Packers getting Aaron Rodgers back into the fold and heading down to Carolina to take on Cam Newton and the Panthers. Go ahead and break this game down. Share what your takes are on the overall outcome potentially, as well as the some of the DFS or fantasy players in this game.
Well, getting back Aaron Rodgers factor certainly elevates the possibility that this becomes a back-and-forth, high-scoring game, and that's what we really want in daily fantasy and season-long fantasy, whatever, trying to bet totals. And the Panthers have been like a pass funnel sort of defense. 8 of the last 9 quarterbacks to face the Panthers the Panthers have allowed multiple touchdown passes to 4 of their last 5 quarterbacks faced, and 8 of 11 quarterbacks since week 2 have been top 16 quarterbacks on the week against the Panthers. That doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it shows that quarterbacks that are facing them have high floors in terms of fantasy scoring. Aaron Rodgers, when he was healthy, he was excellent in the first 4 games. He was a top 10 fantasy quarterback in 4 straight games before suffering his injury. And when Aaron Rodgers was in there, the Packers averaged 42 pass dropbacks per game, which fell to 34 pass dropbacks per game in Brett Hundley starts. So I think we're going to see him air it out in this game. I think that we will see a lot of Jamal Williams again because he's really good in pass protection, which is not something that you usually see from a rookie running back. But I don't think that the Packers are going to have very much success running on this Panthers defensive front, which has been outstanding, top 5 in Football Outsiders DVOA in terms of run defense. And they have shut down every running game that they have faced except for the Saints this year. Actually, the Saints got them twice, but the Saints have been a matchup-proof running game. I don't expect that to be the case. I think that against the Packers. So I think that Aaron Rodgers' return brings back to life Jordy Nelson, but I would not sleep on Davante Adams. It seems like Jordy Nelson is getting more buzz this week as a fantasy play, just because people are expecting this change, and trust me, I'm expecting it too. But Davante Adams actually out-targeted Jordy Nelson 39-29 before Aaron Rodgers went down. Teams all season have been sending their number 1 cornerbacks at Davante Adams instead of Jordy Nelson. So defensive coordinators are noticing that Davante Adams at this point is the more dangerous receiver on the Packers. And this Panthers pass defense has been getting drilled by wide receivers. We saw Robbie Anderson light him up for 146 and 2 touchdowns. Julio Jones 6 for 118. Jermaine Kearse 7 for 105 and a touchdown. Adam Thielen 6 for 105 and a touchdown. Michael Thomas 5 for 70 and a touchdown. Kenny Stills, Devontae Parker, Stephon Diggs all had over 60 yards against them. Jarvis Landry, 5 for 42 and a touchdown. Mohamed Sanu, 3 for 23 and a touchdown. That was all just in the last 5 games for the Panthers. So wide receivers are ripping them wide open. James Bradbury, their number 1 cornerback, I think has had a disappointing second NFL season after a pretty promising rookie year. And their slot corner, Captain Munnerlyn, he threw a fit in practice this week because he has not been playing as much as he thinks that he deserves to be. And then their number 2 cornerback, they've had issues all year with that. They've been mixing and matching Kevon Seymour and Darryl Worley, and I think that they're just not really pleased with their cornerback play at that other position, and for good reason, as alluded to with all that wide receiver production that they are giving up. So I think that we're going to see Davante Adams with double-digit targets in a game like this. I think that Jordy Nelson can get to double-digit targets in a game like this. And then on the other side, the Packers defense is just not very good. And I think that Cam Newton can have a big game on the other side. The Packers are another team that is hemorrhaging wide receiver production. They are missing Kevin King and Devon House, their 2 biggest cornerbacks. Devon House suffered transverse process fractures in his back. He's out this week. Kevin King went on IR last week with a shoulder injury. Devin Funchess is locked in as the Panthers' number 1 receiver, and he's been producing 85-plus yards or a touchdown in 5 straight games. Greg Olsen has done nothing all year. Obviously he was hurt for most of the year, but he's come back and really done nothing. but I would expect him to be a bigger factor in this game. And then Damiere Byrd is a deep, deep sleeper this week, a 4.27 speedster with a 42-inch vertical. He was awesome in the preseason. I played a bunch of him in preseason DFS with Joe Webb. He won you money if you were playing him. Last week, he actually led the Panthers in catches. He had 5 catches. He caught all 5 of his targets for, I think, 37 yards. If we can get another 5 catches out of him, I think he's a decent bet to rip a big play. This is a much tougher or a much softer matchup than what Damiere Byrd faced last week, going up against the Vikings, now going up against the Packers in this potential shootout. So I really like this game, and I really like the wide receiver plays in this game and the quarterbacks, of course.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Evan. And I want to do a little game here with you. It's going to be a case of am I telling the truth or am I lying? Okay, so I'm going to say a bunch of statements because there's a perception, at least in some of the things that I've heard, that some people kind of don't believe that Rodgers is anywhere close to 100%. Like they're throwing out just guesstimate percentages like 60, 70%. He's not going to be quite the same. He's going to have rust, which I do agree with. Like there definitely could be a little bit of rust. But just throwing out these arbitrary statements. So I want to try to take this process to kind of go through, and we'll see what the end result of the survey is. So after each statement, Evan, just say yes if what I said was correct, or say no if what I said was incorrect. All right? Okay. There was talk several weeks back about players on the Packers being upset that Aaron Rodgers was put on the injured reserve designated to return because he had looked so great in practice several weeks ago.
I believe that is true.
Okay. Aaron Rodgers did not want to get x-rays during his rehab and while he had to sit out to let this bone heal because he wanted to stay positive. He wanted to focus on his rehab. The x-ray's not going to help him out whatsoever. It would only tell him, even if it told him great news, he still had to wait until week 15. So he wanted to stay completely positive and focused on getting back as healthy as possible and not worry about the status of his x-rays.
That is definitely true.
2 weeks ago, players were absolutely raving about the way that Aaron Rodgers was throwing the ball with zip in practice, in part because it's so much better than what they had been seeing from Brett Hundley.
That's definitely true.
Last week, Aaron Rodgers played for the full week on the scout team to help prepare Brett Hundley for the game against the Browns.
That is true.
Aaron Rodgers was all set to go this week. All he needed was an x-ray, and the only thing the x-ray was going to do is confirm that the bone was healed enough for him to play. It is a bone inside your body. All he needed to know, was it healed or was it not healed? And the Packers this season, their medical staff, has gone under the scrutiny of should we let a guy play or not? What should we do? Because of what was happening with the tight end who was there. Name is escaping me right now, but who went over to New England because of some of the issues that they had with his medical situation. So this is a medical staff that had to err on the side of caution potentially due to the scrutiny they were under, and they just needed to make sure that this bone was healed enough so that he could be cleared to play.
True.
Okay, Aaron Rodgers got the x-ray, the bone had healed enough, and he announced on Instagram that he was back and ready to play.
True.
Okay, Aaron Rodgers did not have a lower body injury, so his mobility in and out of the pocket should not be impacted.
True.
Aaron Rodgers was able to continue cardio this entire time to stay in great game shape. He's not sitting there nursing a knee injury, a lower leg injury, a hip injury. This is his collarbone. He got screws put in there and a metal plate to hold it in place, And there was talk about how he was attacking his cardio during this period when he was on IR.
8 for 8 with truths.
And so we'll leave it at that, 8 for 8 in truths. The bottom line here is that Aaron Rodgers basically, in effect, was able to let his arm rest for several weeks. This is not like an issue with his shoulder and ligaments or tendons or joints. This is a broken collarbone. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know what it is to be an NFL quarterback, nor will I pretend to know what it is like to break a collarbone. I will say that I have torn up my knees, both knees, had multiple surgeries on both knees to repair internal cartilage and meniscus type damage. And I've also broken my leg, my shin bone, which is the tibia. And I will tell you what, I would have much rather broken the tibia again than had all the knee issues where they're going in there, snipping this, cutting this with the ligaments and stuff's got to heal and fix the cartilage and doing all that rehab. The broken bone is just like set it and you're good. Now, again, mine was a lower leg issue, so all my muscles had atrophied by the time I could get back into things. But with Rodgers, that's different. He got onto like professional rehab schedule, and I think people are really underestimating, the level that he's going to come back at. His head coach said, "You're going to come back, and we need him to be Aaron Rodgers. We don't want like him to do anything other than what he does." And he came back and said, "I'm going to be the quarterback, and I'm going to play. There's only one way I know how to play." So he's prepared to do what he normally does. The risk is, will he get landed on? Will he get hit? Will he re-break it? But that doesn't have anything to do with his ability to throw the ball down the field. That's another injury risk that he might be a little bit more prone to. If anything, in my opinion, sometimes when guys are dealing with stuff like that, mentally they're going to be even more focused on getting the ball out quickly, making good, accurate decisions, because their brain is just on turned up to level 11 out of 10 to just focus on their task at hand and what they need to do, because they don't want to take all those hits. So the whole offense is going to be jacked up to be playing with Aaron Rodgers back there. The offensive line is going to be trying to protect extra hard for him. The receivers are going to try to get open, run the perfect routes for him. I mean, just little steps here or there could make a difference in this game, and I feel like the players, all 11 of them on the field there, are going to get those extra efforts that a team needs, even though if you say this is a must-win game, they're going to play great no matter what. When Aaron Rodgers comes back out onto the field, there's expectations, and I think players could take an extra step here or there a little bit better when he's out there. But let's cut to what Aaron Rodgers actually means to this team and to this game. And first, we're going to discuss what he's capable of doing inside of the red zone. So Aaron Rodgers in the red zone was hitting at 79% in his 5 games that he played on the season. And these weren't against terrible defenses either. This was the Seahawks and the Falcons and the Bengals and the Bears were the first 4 teams that he faced. 79%, as you know, Evan, absolutely ludicrous. Maybe 2 games you do that, maybe 3 at best. Maybe you do 5 games, but you're only getting into the red zone 2 or 3 times a game at most, so you can get lucky on those couple of tries and you boost your percentages. He was going in there 4 and 5 times a game, and they were converting at 79%. Now, to tell you how astronomically great that is, Rodgers has missed basically the last 8 games. Hundley has converted at just a 50% clip inside the red zone. 50%, not very good. But because of what Rodgers did in those first 5 weeks, the Packers still rank as the 3rd best red zone offense on the entire year. The 3rd best in the whole freaking league because of Aaron Rodgers destroying people when he was there at a 79% clip, not because Hundley did a 50% clip for the last 8 weeks. So absolutely remarkable. Tells you really how far and away strong this offense was playing back when he was there healthy at the beginning of the season. And then you've got the deep passes. I mean, this isn't even a discussion. Hundley is averaging 9.1 yards per attempt on a pass that travels 15 or more yards in the air. Rodgers was averaging 17 yards per attempt. Rodgers had over 100 passer rating. Hundley was down at like a 60-something passer rating. So there is, just like you mentioned, there's going to be a lot more upside for the Green Bay Packers offense in general. And then one more thing before I talk about the Panthers. You look at what Rodgers had last season. Last season, this was a pass-first team. Like, they had no run game. It was basically like Aaron Rodgers dropped back 45 times because we need you. They weren't able to run the ball very well for the last couple of years. But guess what? Because they had no Rodgers and because Hundley struggled so much, this team needed a run game to develop, and they had to work hard to figure out how to get that done. And you know what? They rank third most efficient rushing offense and the fifth most successful rushing offense over the entire course of the season. And they've been continuing, as we saw last week against a very good run defense in Cleveland, continuing to execute on the ground. And that's going to give something that to Rodgers that he hasn't had in a little while, which is like the threat of a strong run game. And trust me, when you put Rodgers back there and let him air it out deep, defenses are going to have to sag off. That run game can be even more dangerous. And conversely, if they have to come to stop the run game, Rodgers is going to just crush him over the top. I mean, he's never had teams had to come up and try to stop the run against him in recent memory. So I really think that Aaron Rodgers is in a great spot. This whole offense is in a great spot. The one issue is the rust. And that's something it's going to be impossible for us to know or predict what that's going to be until he actually gets out there. You can imagine that there's going to be a couple routes that aren't run what he was expecting them to be perfectly crisp, and an incompletion occurs. And it could be on a crucial third down that forces a punt. There might be some of that happening. But I have a feeling with the familiarity with him and these guys, the fact that he played for the entire first quarter of the season, he's been practicing with the team for the last several weeks, like he's back on the same page for the most part. Conversely, on the other side of the ball, I'll just co-sign everything you said about the Panthers here, Evan. I think that the Packers' defense is overrated. I've said that for a while now. This is a team that, on the season, has played the 24th ranked schedule of opposing passing offenses based on success rate, and they've recorded the fifth worst success rate allowed. Okay, not good whatsoever. And I think you can pass the ball on them. The other thing is, tell me about this real quick, Evan, before we go to the next game. Cam Newton running the football. To start this season, Cam was not running the football because he was recovering from an injury. And there was all this talk about in the offseason, is Cam going to run? They can't let him run and get hit all the time. And what's he going to do? And then Cam basically comes out and says, I only know one way to play this position. I'm going to run. The coach, Ron Rivera, comes out and says, Cam's got to do what Cam does best. And what is one thing that Green Bay has struggled with historically is running quarterbacks. Colin Kaepernick ate these guys alive in Green Bay. Russell Wilson has eaten them alive before with his ability to run. So you get Cam there, and he's now running the ball a little bit more. Just adds a total new dimension to ways that the Panthers can attack this Packers defense. And if you look at who the Packers have faced, you're talking about a whole laundry list of immobile pocket passers. Kaiser. You look at they played before that, Tampa Bay, Pittsburgh with Roethlisberger, Baltimore with Flacco, Trubisky on the Bears, which he's a little bit more mobile, but they don't have him running a whole lot. Stafford with the Lions, Drew Brees with the Saints. Like, you can go on through this list, but they haven't really played very many mobile quarterbacks. So I do think that there's an edge there for them to run the ball. Before we toss it to the next game, Evan, briefly, what is your take on the upside of Cam running the football? Do you think it's a factor? Am I overrating it slightly? What are your belief of the Packers at, are they any better at stopping quarterbacks running the football based on what you've seen?
No, I don't think that they are. I mean, they haven't faced a ton of mobile quarterbacks necessarily this year, but all those instances that you mentioned historically of running mobile quarterbacks just gashing them, they all occurred under the same defensive coordinator, Dom Capers, who has always pretty much ran the same system, in Green Bay. So I'm totally with you. I mean, Cam Newton has 40-plus rushing yards and/or a touchdown in 10 of his last 11 starts. And then the Packers have given up 270 more passing yards to 5 of their last 7 quarterbacks faced. Cam's issue has been that he's struggled as a passer. I mean, I think that's fair to say. And I would say that he has been inconsistent. But if you combine what he has been doing on the ground with how the Packers have been getting gashed through the air, and he can put those things together, then he has, the potential to be the highest scoring fantasy quarterback on the slate and to have a monster game and for this game to go over the total, et cetera.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there. Let's break down the granddaddy of them all this weekend. The New England Patriots versus the Pittsburgh Steelers for home field throughout the AFC playoffs. Massive game for both teams. Break it down. What do you think? What are your thoughts on this game?
So the Steelers missing Ryan Shazier is going to be really, really big, especially with Rob Gronkowski coming back. After taking a week off, resting his body, which I'm sure is as banged up as any players in football because he runs all these routes over the middle. He falls hard. I wouldn't say maybe clumsy might not be the right word. I mean, he's a great athlete, so it's tough to call great athletes clumsy, but he definitely takes a lot of punishment out there. He's just a big target, man, and he does not fall soft. He falls really, really hard. So I think that he can benefit from that week off during the season, even though it hurt the Patriots in the short term. Patriots are a great team that you expect to bounce back after bad games. And they played a bad game against the Dolphins. I mean, the Dolphins played a great game, but the Patriots played their worst game of the season, at least since week 1 against the Chiefs. The game was kind of like that game against the Chiefs because they tried to take shots downfield to Chris Hogan. Those didn't work. They didn't have really any sustaining element on offense. Their running back distribution got thrown all out of whack because they were playing from behind. And, we didn't see very much of Rex Burkhead and Deion Lewis in the second half. We saw a lot more James White. Chris Hogan had been coming off that month-long layoff, and the chemistry just wasn't there with him and Tom Brady. And Brandon Cooks wasn't winning. Dolphins cornerback Xavier Howard had the best game of his life. This was a guy who was getting torched. I mean, as of week 12, Xavier Howard was the last rated cornerback in Pro Football Focus's ratings out of 119. And he's turned in a couple of great games back to back. And that was one of them. And he was a dominant cornerback out there in that particular game. And I think that, as a great team, we expect the Patriots to bounce back. We talk about the matchup edges that Gronk will have with no Shazier. He has also really crushed the Steelers historically. His worst game against them, he's played 5 career games against them, including the playoffs. His worst career game against them was 7 catches for 94 yards. He's got a bunch of huge games against them. The Steelers may be getting Joe Hayden back, but I mean, coming off of, 5-6 week layoff, coming off a broken leg, I don't even know that he would be an asset. And the Steelers have been getting ripped up by wide receivers. Marvin Jones, 6 for 128. Rashard Matthews, 5 for 113 and a touchdown. Chester Rogers, 6 for 104 and a touchdown. T.J. Jones, Golden Tate, Devontae Adams all over 80 yards. A.J. Green 7 for 77 and 2 touchdowns. Last week, Mike Wallace 3 for 72. Dante Moncrief ripped a 60-yard touchdown against him. Chris Moore last week 3 for 48 and a touchdown. That's just in a 6-week span. So I think that Brandon Cooks can bounce back from his worst game of the season. He had 1 catch on 7 targets against the Dolphins. I would expect Chris Hogan to be better in his second game back from his injury, and Gronk to be in great shape in a very good matchup. On the other side, this Patriots defense, I think, is in trouble. This Steelers passing game looks pretty much matchup proof right now. They have played some defenses that people would consider good, and they have lit them up. And Malcolm Butler, who the Patriots historically have used to cover Antonio Brown, is not having a very good year. He's given up the 11th most yards in the NFL and the 3rd most touchdowns in the NFL. I think that we are going to see Stephon Gilmore on Martavis Bryant just because they need that from a size standpoint. And then if Juju Smith-Schuster plays, and he's listed as questionable with a hamstring, but he did practice limited on Friday, I would say that he's a little bit likelier than not to play. He can cause the Patriots a lot of problems. We saw Jarvis Landry in the slot. Juju plays a lot in the slot. Jarvis Landry last week had 8 for 46 and 2 touchdowns against the Patriots. And the Patriots have started to juggle their slot corners because they did not like what they were getting out of Jonathan Jones. They went to Eric Rowe, who really isn't a slot corner. He's like a big press corner, and he's kind of a tough fit in the slot. And he's a guy that I think that Juju can win against. And then the biggest edge that they have, I'll just leave this one for you because I know that you want to pound it, but the biggest edge that the Steelers have is Le'Veon Bell. And the one thing that I'll add is that the Patriots are going to be without their big nose tackle, Alan Branch, listed at 324 coming out of Michigan. I think he probably weighs about 350 these days. And he has, he's like their designated early down run stopper. And without him, the Patriots are going to be at a severe run defense disadvantage.
Evan, awesome breakdown. I 100% agree on some of the edges that the Steelers passing game is going to have here. Here's my concern. On a scale of 1 to 10, what do you grade the Steelers offensive coordinator slash, strategically the way that Tomlin helps game plan for opponents? Do you feel like they're maximizing their edges and choosing optimal decision making, or do you feel like they are just thinking that they've got great players and trying to put those guys into great positions to make plays and not really game planning enough for their opponent?
I would say the latter. I would say that, and I mean, you definitely analyze play callers, from a down and distance standpoint much more than I do. But when I'm watching the game, as opposed to mapping out the data, what does this team do on 2nd and 10, et cetera. But when I'm watching the game, I definitely get the feel, watching the Steelers, that they're not an optimal play calling team. And that the reason that they're really good is because they have really good players. And the coaches do, I would say, they do a good job of moving Antonio Brown around and getting him in favorable positions. And I think that they've done a good job over the years of limiting the hits on Ben Roethlisberger. He used to be a guy who took a lot of hits, and they've tried to stress getting the ball out of his hands more quickly. He doesn't make as many throws as he used to with guys just hanging on his back. That was something that was wearing on him. And I mean, I especially lately, getting Le'Veon Bell the ball more in space, getting him more receptions where he's so dynamic. I mean, having a guy that is to 220 pounds with the incredible agility that he does, getting him into space on the second level is just, it's a severe mismatch for any defense. So I think that there are some good things that they do, but I would say that from a play calling standpoint, just from watching the games, not looking at data like you do, I would say that I get the feel that they are not an optimal play calling team.
Yeah, and that's absolutely a fair assessment of it. I agree with everything there, especially, I won't doubt that getting Le'Veon Bell as a receiver in space is a great strategy. Anytime you can get him the ball, it's never a really bad decision. But there's a reason why the Steelers end up playing down to their opponent caliber so often. And you don't see some of the other best teams in the league do that nearly as often over the years. And there's a reason why, for instance, the Steelers went pass heavy against the Jaguars back several weeks ago when the Jaguars had the number 1 pass defense but the number 32 run defense. It's the coaching, in my opinion, that causes a lot of this. And my concern in this game is that the Steelers will not go run heavy enough, and it will cost them this game. And the reason being is this is a team that has been winning games through the air. They have gone 72% pass overall, including 73% when the game's within 1 score over the past month. By far, both of those are tops in the NFL. The average is like 56% pass in 1-score games. It's definitely a massive change when they were prior to that, when they were just 47% run. They're going way more pass heavy at this time. But the issue is this. The Patriots, this is why you don't look at year-long data as much anymore, because the Patriots, you can look at what they've done and say they're bad against the run, they're bad against the pass this year. But if you study what they did since playing a good offense in the LA Chargers back in Week 8 and everything they've done since then, they actually right now rank the 4th best in the league in pass defense, allowing just 40% of passes to grade out as successful. Their run defense is the worst in the league, allowing 57% of runs to grade out as successful. Now, this is even more obvious on third down situations. On third down, the Patriots are allowing just 27% of passes to convert into a first down. 27. It's the third best in the league. The only teams that are better are the Jaguars and the Vikings. Okay, 2 great defenses that everybody knows about. Meanwhile, the Patriots are allowing, take that 27% I just mentioned, reverse the numbers. They're allowing 72% success on third down rushes, which is the worst in the NFL. So you're talking about one of the best to one of the worst on third downs, one of the best to one of the worst in all situations. And a 72% success rushing conversion rate on third downs is astronomical. The Steelers have played the Patriots 3 times with Le'Veon Bell since 2013. They lost all those games. Bell is averaging just 14 yards per carry in those games. Everything you said is 100% true with regard to Tom Brady and this offense and Gronk and their edges and things that they can do against the Steelers. Pittsburgh can absolutely not get too enamored with trying to hit big plays if it's not working, trying to hit all these passes on first and second down, and then facing 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, where they have to throw the football into the 3rd best defense in the league right now at preventing passes to convert first downs on third down. They can't afford to do that. They have to stay on schedule so that when they're in third down, if they get to third down, right, you want to bypass it, of course, but if you get to third down, it's 3rd and short where you could choose to run or pass the football. You can't be in 3rd and long against the Patriots. You're not going to be able to convert very many of those up and down the field. So my concern for the Steelers on their side of the football is that they make good decisions and prevent themselves, like they love their passing game, they love Ben, they love AB, they love the success there. Don't go 70% pass. Don't go 68% pass. Don't go 65% pass. Please, if they can keep it down to like 60% pass or 57 to 60% pass, I think they're in a great spot to have a lot of success here. But if they, granted, if they're down 2 touchdowns, what do you think they're going to have to do? But the other thing that I'll say is that oftentimes we've seen this with the Steelers with their play calling. If something doesn't work early in the game, they are rarely the type of team to keep going back to it. We saw it against Jacksonville. They tried to start running Le'Veon Bell. The Jaguars knew that. They played great run defense to start the game. The first 7 minutes, they really shut down Le'Veon Bell. Steelers just went pass heavy the rest of the entire game. Now, sometimes the New England Patriots do that, but that's when they're playing a top-rated run defense. They'll just say, screw this. Why are we going to do this all day? Bang our head into a brick wall. Let's pass the ball. The Patriots don't have a great run defense. The Jaguars didn't have a great run defense. They just slowed them down for a little bit, and what ended up happening? Going pass heavy against the number one pass defense. Ben throws like multiple pick sixes, a couple more interceptions on top of that. Even though the game's one score in the third quarter, they just eliminated Le'Veon Bell themselves from the game plan, just stopped going to him. The Steelers have to go more towards Bell in this game, throughout the game. Even if it doesn't work great in the first quarter, they've got to keep sticking with it. But I will tell you, Evan, I fully agree. I mean, you've got to get Le'Veon Bell the ball through the air. You've got to, of course, utilize AB, one of the best receivers in the game. Like, I'm certainly not trying to advocate that the Steelers go and take like a page out of the Tennessee Titans playbook and just run the ball the entire game. But they can't be in the 72 to 73% range like they've been the last 4 weeks. And I hope that they don't do that, because I think we're going to get a great game if they just stay a little bit more balanced. I definitely am concerned that if they go pass heavy here, that it will lead to some punts, and Brady will get the ball and convert and score points and, put the Steelers in a position where then they have to keep passing the football. But I'm so excited to watch this game as a fan. I haven't done anything with it yet, but I might get involved at some point, but I have not yet. I think it's going to be a fascinating game. I think there are edges here for both offenses, but it just comes down to, Evan, we see sometimes in these big games, like, what is the strategy that the offenses take? And that dictates, because both these teams can have success running the football or passing it. And how aggressive do they try to get? How quickly do they put up points? I mean, the Steelers, in my mind, would be much better suited to try to keep Brady on the bench as opposed to just going for the jugular and trying to score early in the game. That said, we saw how much success Miami had when they got out to a big lead and forced, the Patriots to be a little bit more one-dimensional. So for the perspective that I'm not sure what we're going to see here, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to the strategy that these teams roll out and what matchups they're trying to go after and how the other team adjusts to it. That's another thing I think the Steelers don't do a great job of, is making in-game adjustments. And Belichick is going to flip some things up, particularly at halftime. And I just think the Steelers probably not well suited for that. You saw what they did in the first half against the Ravens the other week, and then they came out in the second half, and Baltimore takes a big lead on them. The Steelers have to fight and claw to get back into that game with some of the adjustments that the Ravens did themselves, as the Steelers really couldn't counter. And if you think the Ravens offense can make some adjustments and have some success, just imagine what the Patriots with Brady are going to be able to do. Any take on any of that, Evan, before we touch on one other game that we are finding to be difficult to break down?
No, I think we broke it down pretty well.
Okay, the last game, we wanted to go over this, Evan, but there's just 2 key injuries here, one in particular, that make this game very difficult to forecast until we know the status of these players, and we're probably not going to know until either Schefter tweets it out at 2 a.m. Or most likely, a few hours before the game when inactive get announced. But you talk about those injuries and how important they are for this game for the Seahawks against the Rams on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of moving parts in this game, period. We could start with the Rams, actually. So the Rams suffered 2 offensive line injuries last week, one to Andrew Whitworth, maybe the best pass protection left tackle in football, sprained MCL, but he was full practice on Friday, wasn't even listed on the injury report, so he's going to play. They suffered another one to right guard Rob Havenstein, one of the best run-blocking guards in football, but he was full practice, and he will play. And then they lost their number 2 cornerback, Kayvon Webster, to a torn Achilles. They also lost their number 1 cornerback, Tremaine Johnson, to a concussion, but then it was determined that he actually did not suffer a concussion, so he will be out there. But Kayvon Webster will not be out there, and that could make life a little bit easier on Paul Richardson or Tyler Lockett as the Seahawks perimeter receivers. And then on the other side, in the injuries that you were getting at, well, we know that Cam Chancellor is going to be out, but the big ones are KJ Wright, Seahawks weak side linebacker. He's one of the best outside linebackers, 4-3 outside linebackers in football. He is doubtful with a concussion. And then the middle linebacker, Bobby Wagner, he's someone that people have talked about as a defensive player of the year candidate. He has been playing at that high of a level. He's questionable and did not practice all week due to a hamstring injury. That does not bode well. That suggests to me that even if he's out there, he may not be effective. He may not last very long. And if the Seahawks are without both of these guys, I think that the game sets up considerably better for Todd Gurley. So that's where we are with the injuries right now.
Yeah, it's going to be a great, interesting game. The Rams traveling to play in hostile environments. These games always seem to be kind of close and competitive back and forth, but not really bunches of points. But with some of these defensive injuries, maybe we will see a game that falls closer to this total than some of the prior matchups have. But just a great Sunday of football to follow on to what should be a pretty exciting Saturday of football. With that said, Evan, I think we broke down some of these key games in a lot of detail, shared a couple under and overrated players. I'm really excited for this weekend's game. So I guess on that note, we can wrap it up. Any final parting words that you would like to share?
No, just good luck to everyone.
All right, guys. That's Evan Silva of rotoworld.com. Tremendous follow on Twitter at Evan Silva. Obviously, great matchup articles that he produces every single week. Highly recommend you check those out on Thursdays up at rotoworld.com. And you don't have to do it just on Thursday. If you're just listening to this for the first time and you never read them before, go check them out now. You got all day Saturday and Sunday morning to dive in and see what Evan thinks of all the matchups, all the players in the games. So highly recommend that. I highly recommend you guys check out the free website, sharpfootballstats.com. I'm adding visualizations every single week. Lots of things that you won't find anywhere else out there that are going to really help you, I think, get an edge in some of the DFS stuff that you might be doing. And I'm getting emails, from different people who are having a ton of fun with the stats website, providing feedback to me in the contact page and just sharing about the fact that they love using these tools to help them do their own research, drop their own process. A guy just emailed me. He said, this is more valuable to me than any podcast or Twitter, just being able to play with these tools myself. So just really glad that people are enjoying the site, and I'm trying to add to it on a weekly basis to make things even more useful, especially like now at the end of the season where you need to focus more on trending stats. Don't worry about the full season quite as much, and I put out some trending visualizations for you. And if you have never gone to the site and you're new to the site, check out on the right-hand section the tab that's called Hot, sharpfootballstats.com, the tab called Hot. Scroll down there. I've listed my top 11 pages. If you're kind of like, where do I get started? There's a lot of stuff here. my top 11 pages that I think you'll find the most useful, as well as I've listed out the top 5 pages based on user clicks. How many people are going to these pages? I listed out the top 5 most popular pages from the month of November, so you could see what other people like yourself are looking at on the site. So at any rate, with that said, guys, a lot of fun. Looking forward to this weekend. Hope you guys have a great one. Good luck, and we will talk to you again next week.
You do know we on national TV, right?
Oh, I thought we were just on FaceTime. I was telling them my big dog, man.